Hi, in this video, we're going to cover the exam guide for the IB Business Management HL syllabus for 2025. The purpose of this video is to help you prepare for your exams and just give you some tips and tricks for the upcoming 2025 exams. In this video, we're going to go over the different types of exam papers and how they've changed over the past. We're going to talk about time allocation for the questions, any question answer techniques that you should be aware of, and what kind of past papers you can review to go over and best prepare yourself for the upcoming exams. So the biggest change that's happened for the business management course is that there are now 3 papers as opposed to 2 papers in the past. Before, paper 1 and 2 were the only ones, and paper 3 has been introduced. First with paper 1, this is actually a case study based question paper. So the IB will actually provide this pre-release statement, which is essentially just the first page of the case study. So in this case, we have one-way limited, and we have about 10 lines of content. And this is all that they will provide in the pre-release statement. The actual paper itself is going to show you the entire case study. So here we can see the same one is actually not just 10 lines, but 1, 2, and 3 pages long. In the past, the IB used to do paper 1 differently, where they would send out an entire 5 to 6 page long case studies well in advance of the exams, so that students could familiarize themselves with the case study before the exam. This is no longer the option, so you want to spend some time reading through this case study and familiarizing yourself during the exam. Then we have the questions. So in section A, you need to answer all of these questions, and in section B, you answer any one of the 2 10-mark questions. So in terms of time allocation, you want to spend about 25 minutes to read through the case study. During these 25 minutes, make sure you mark and highlight any points that are necessary for your answer, especially for the 10-mark question. Next, you want to spend about 30 minutes to answer all the questions in section B, and about 35 minutes to answer that 10-mark question from section B. The command terms that you will most likely come across in paper 1 are define and state, describe and explain, or discuss and recommend. Define and state are going to be the simpler, smaller questions. So in this case, you'll notice that these are 2-mark questions. The describe and explain command terms are slightly larger, 4-mark questions. This one is an exception where they've asked you to only explain one disadvantage, which is why it's only 2 marks. In this case, it's slightly more, so it's 6 marks, where you're supposed to explain 3 different things. Basically, each argument you make will carry 2 marks. So the argument itself has to be correctly identified, and then the subsequent supporting arguments that you can make for it as well. Usually this will be a reference to the case study, which you can also get from these lines that's mentioned at the end of the question. The 10-mark questions will have either discuss or recommend, depending on which question you answer, but ultimately this is going to be a full-on essay style question. So when planning for your section B questions, what you want to do is, first of all, you want to take 5 minutes out of the 35 minutes here to plan your answer. What this will allow you to do is you can take your references from the case study, the points that you want to argue, connect it to the theory and the concepts that you believe will best support the information from the case study, and quite literally plan out your answer. So argument number one, argument number two, argument number three, four, and so on. The reason why you want to take this time is because once you're done with the planning, you can then move on to the writing part where you don't have to think about the structure or what you're going to say next. You already have a plan, you already have an idea of what you want to say, in what order you want to say it, and so this will help speed up the writing part of your answering. Now, this is all very important because time management is very critical when it comes to essay style answers, because if you don't manage your time properly, there's a good chance you're not going to finish your paper on time. And that is definitely something you want to avoid. Next, we have exam tips. So what you can do is attempt the questions in section A first, before you even read the case study or in its entirety. Attempt the questions in section A and read the parts or the lines or paragraphs that are relevant to the question. So this goes back to those line references that you have at the end. What this allows you to do is read specific lines or specific paragraphs from the case study, and you can begin to build an idea of what the case study is about, while also answering questions and maintaining your time management. And then once you move to section B, before you do that, that's when you want to go back and read the case study and mark or highlight important points that you want to make or you want to argue when answering a 10-mark question. And of course, allocate 5 minutes to plan out your answer, and always make sure you have a minimum of 4 arguments. Usually, these arguments should be balanced in terms of 2 advantages and 2 disadvantages, or 2 arguments for, 2 arguments against. However, that may not always be the case. Sometimes you might have a situation where you make 3 advantages and 1 disadvantage, or vice versa. But remember that there will always be 1 argument for each side. There will always be 1 positive or 1 advantage. There will always be at least 1 negative or 1 disadvantage. If you don't do that, the IB will consider that your answer is not properly balanced, that you're not considering all aspects of the case study, all aspects of the concepts, and so you won't get the best possible marks. Finally, you want to follow the 3 C's, which is concept, context, and content. Concept is just your business management concepts that you've studied over your IB years. This is everything that you've picked up from your textbook and from your classes. Context is going to be the data from the case study that you're going to use to make an argument. Now remember, even if you use a correct concept to make an argument, but you don't have context, or you don't have data from the case study to support your argument is automatically invalid. It's not wrong, but it doesn't apply to the case study, and therefore you won't get marks for it. The last C is content, which is your contribution or your part of the argument. Content is your critical analysis, your judgment, or your opinion on whether or not the argument you've just made is a good fit for the company, whether it is most likely to occur, or whether it will not work out, or if it's most likely to not happen, and for whatever reason that might be. For more information on the 3 C's, you can reach out to your HKExcel tutor for more information. Finally, you want to practice all the past papers in the last 5 years, because even though the structure and the format of the paper has changed, the questions, the way you're supposed to prepare for them, are also very similar to paper ones in the past. And so the more revision you can get in, the better. Um, Older case studies are going to be much longer, so it'll be difficult to practice those. So your best bet would be to find specimen papers or practice the 2024 exam papers, May and October. Next, we have paper two. So paper two is an hour and 45 minutes long. And here as well, you have section A and section B. But for this case, you want to answer all three questions in section A, but only one of two questions in section B. The paper is worth 50 marks. And in terms of time allocation, you want to spend about 50 to 60 minutes in section A since there are three questions, and then 45 to 50 minutes in section B. So next, we'll look at one of these papers to see what we're dealing with. Here we have a Business Management HL paper 2. This is the 2024 paper. So the first three questions are going to be largely calculation based. Of course, you'll have state or define questions, but then you can see here, calculate the current ratio, working capital, and basically you keep getting more questions from the finance unit for these first three questions. This is different from paper twos in the past where you would get only two questions and you would have to only answer one of the two questions. But now, make sure you answer all the questions in section A. Again, before you even start writing, always remember to read this little line at the top. It'll tell you what you need to do. In this case, answer all the questions. If we scroll down to section B, here we go. In section B, it asks you to answer only one question. So make sure to read that. Now, section B is going to be less to do with calculations and more to do with theory. So you're given a case study, and the idea here is to apply the concepts that match the question. So here you actually have a choice. So what is best practice is first read the questions. You don't have to go through the case study. Read the questions, see if you are familiar with them, see if you're confident to answer them. Do the same for both questions, and then make your choice of which one you want to answer. Your 2 marks, 4 marks, potentially 6-mark questions are going to be relatively easier to answer. The majority of your time for section B should be spent towards answering the 10-mark question. So again, answer the questions that you are confident with first. This is in reference especially to section A with all the calculation questions, because if you're confident about the question, write the answer, move on to the next one. Don't waste time trying to remember which one or which formula you're supposed to use. You can always do this once you've prioritized the marks that you can guarantee first. Also, remember to revise the finance unit for paper 2. That is going to be a huge part of this paper, and you want to be refreshing your memory for all the different formulas, the structures for the financial statements, and anything related to the finance section. For the 10-mark question, again, allow yourself 5 minutes to plan your answer, same as before. Again, have at least 4 arguments, follow the 3 C's. For paper 2, again, it's just the format of the question that's different. The questions themselves and what you're supposed to do for paper 2 is still largely similar to what paper 2 has been in the past. And so feel free to practice the last 5, even more than 5 years, if you have the time. The more calculation questions you practice, the better and more familiar you will be with the style of questioning. And so it'll help you better prepare for these types of questions. Not to mention, the more questions you practice, you're going to find out or figure out where you are still lacking or which concepts you're still weak at um, right before your exams. And so you can go back and revise those concepts or those chapters specifically. Finally, we have paper 3. This is the new paper. It's similar to paper 1 in the sense that it is also case study based. So, first of all, you have an hour and 15 minutes to answer all the questions, 3 questions in the paper. It's worth a total of 25 marks. And in terms of time allocation, you want to spend 15 to 20 minutes to read through the case study, 10 to 15 minutes to finish the first 2 questions, which is a 2-mark question and a 6-mark question, and then 40 to 45 minutes for the third question, which is a 17-mark question. Now, that number is huge, and so it can seem intimidating. However, rest assured that it is similar to your 10-mark question in the sense that it's still an essay. The difference is in 2 things. Number 1, what you're talking about, because the question itself will determine that. And number 2, how many arguments you make. For a 10-mark question, you need a minimum of 4 arguments. For a 17-mark question, you want to bump that up and make that a minimum of 7 to 8 arguments. That's pretty much the only difference. But you are going to be talking about a lot more things. So again, planning is key. In terms of the command terms, you have describe, explain, and recommend, and we can look at the paper to get a better idea. So paper 3 is also going to be a 3 to 4 page long case study, similar to paper 1. The difference is that you don't get an excerpt or you don't get a little pre-release statement like you do it for paper 1. So you're going to need to spend some time to read through the case study before you're able to answer your essay question. So the best approach again would be to go to the questions and read through them first. For the 2-mark question, it's not going to be too difficult. Mainly it's going to be theory based and it's just a matter of applying it to the case study very simply. The 6-mark question will tell you which resource and other information to use and then ask you the question. So in this case, what you can do is go back and check resource 3. It's a table here, so you want to use financial data to answer the question. Finally, read through the 3rd question, which is usually recommending a possible plan. So really, the question is to come up with a plan, come up with an idea, strategize what the business can do. So the whole purpose of this question is to actually put you in the role of a manager or CEO and get you to figure out how a business would make these decisions, how it would approach these obstacles or problems. Again, all the information you're going to need is in the case study. It's a matter of picking it out. So, read through the questions first and understand what information you need to extract from the case study. Then go to the case study, mark and highlight your important points while reading through it. In this case, instead of allocating just 5 minutes, take 5 to 10 minutes to plan out your answer. You're going to still plan it out in the same way as I mentioned earlier. It's just going to be a little bit more planning since it's a 17-mark question. In terms of practice, this is a new paper. There hasn't been much context provided in the past. So your best bets are the last 2 years of past papers and possibly the specimen paper if you can get your hands on it. And of course, if you want more information, the tutors at HKExcel are happy to provide you with more information.